Danny, do you want to mute ourselves?
I don't think we need to mute. We only have a few people, and they are wonderful people. So I think we'll just let everybody speak when they want to. So we are going to discuss the question of whether God intervenes in human affairs. That's our topic this evening. Next week, we're on to the problem of evil. So we're going back into the 12th and early 13th century with Maimonides. This is the translation to modern Hebrew by Baruch Schwartz. I was able to find this chapter only, on the internet. And Yoshua Sternbuch would have been happy, but he sent me a mail that he has a professional commitment on Wednesday evenings, so we'll have to look at the recordings and will not be able to participate. So we will miss him, but we continue. There are 5 views, says Maimonides, about whether God intervenes in human affairs. One of you says God doesn't intervene, and everything in the world, from the heavens below and below, it's just chance. In fact, there is no God at all. It's just chance, okay? And there are natural laws, and that's how things work. There's no organizer. There is no one in charge. Zoti dat who? Epicurus. Epicurus. Ever heard of Epicurus? What do you want to say about Epicurus?
It's to do with food.
It was already
It's a food.
a few words.
The food.
Epicurean.
Epicurean. Why is Epicurus associated
pleasure.
with food? Good food. Because he says what's important is enjoying yourself. Have good food, have good physical relationships, have a good time, and don't get into anything too tense or challenging, because there is no organizer, there's no God, and everything is a random movement of atoms. Look at the next bit of line 6. Hu af he'emin bechelkikim. He believed in atomic particles. Now, the ancient Greeks, very interesting. We think it's all new. Atheism, Darwin, scientific atheism. It's not. Goes back to Epicurus and his teachers. He died in 341 before the Common Era. But the atomic theory, atoms, go back even earlier to the 5th century BCE. Who are the famous atomists? Leucippus and Democritus.
1.6.
Democritus. And they said there is motion. So atoms are flying around.
Last time
And what Epicurus wrote was very interesting. He said that you can cut an apple because apples are made of atoms and there's spaces between the atoms. That's how you can cut an apple. Interesting. This is 300 years before the Common Era. So the world is just a buzz of atoms flying all over the place randomly. Just happenstance. Now there were some Israelites who also believed in that, says Maimonides. Yirmiyahu has a pasuk. He's talking about the people of Judea in his time. He says they denied God and they said he's not there. They meant he doesn't intervene. But Mamram uses the verse more broadly and says, not only does God not intervene, he's not there. Long time before Nietzsche, God is there. He never was. Aristo hochiach hochacham muftit. Kedad zo absurdit. Do I have to? I used to have a what's it here, an arrow. Do I have to mute?
Everybody, yeah.
I'm muting now. I'm muting.
You've muted. Thank you. So Aristotle, proved for Maimonides' satisfaction that the world does have a designer, and this is absurdit. Can anybody translate the Hebrew word absurdit into English?
Absurd.
Fantastic. You are just a fantastic third. Okay? So there we are. Absurd. This is not Ibn Tibbon. This, of course, is Michael Schwartz, the most recent modern Hebrew edition. I found this chapter on the internet, so we have it in this easy-to-read form. Not possible. This world cannot have come into existence purely by accident. There is an organizer and a planner. Maimonides is modest. He wrote long chapter, in book 1 and book 2 of the guide about proving the existence of God. And I'm not going to go into this now because that's not what we are doing. But we can make a very good case, and always have been able to, for the existence of God, even when we take into account the most advanced scientific theories in relation to evolution, cosmology, Big Bang. We can easily accommodate it with the existence of God if we want to. Okay? So, as I said, we could do a shiur on that, but that will be later on down the line. So this is one of 5. Epicurus is clearly not on Maimonides' agenda. So let's have a look at a second view. Some things that happen in life, they are organized by God. But other things that happen in life are governed by pure chance. This is Aristotle. I'm going to give you, well, I trimmed this down. Amar Alexander. Who is Alexander? Alexander of Aphrodisias. Remember we talked about him? He was the last major commentator on Aristotle, Alexander of Aphrodisias. He was actually second century Common Era, and he is called Scholastius, which is Greek for the commentator. He was renowned in the Muslim world as the main commentator on Aristotle. Most of them only read Alexander, and Rambam refers to him in the Moreh on a number of occasions. It was every self-respecting, educated person in the Islamic world would know Alexander of Aphrodisias and learn Aristotle through him. Correct, John? Correct. Alexander of Aphrodisias is our Scholasticus. He is our man when it comes to Aristotle. So let's see, what does Alexander say? Beginning of line 14. Divine providence only preserves general species, whole and entire groups. Okay? But individuals might cease to exist under circumstances of pure serendipity. Now Aristotle says, individuals like us, even if we don't qualify as an entire group, will nevertheless be equipped with certain survival skills. And the survival skills, as I'm going to praise for you now, they rise with our intellect. In other words, things which are mineral don't have too many survival skills. Vegetable, less. Animal, more. Human beings, because they're smart, they have the capacity to develop great survival skills. But these survival skills will not help when it comes to, say, a natural disaster or any terrible things that may happen in life. Okay? So what we have is the potential, okay? But there's no guarantee. And this is basically what Aristotle says. In a nutshell, he says many things. I'm not going to give you theory of spheres, sublunar world. We have 4 elements in the sublunar world. The higher you go in the spheres, you get a different material out of which things are made, and they are more form rather than matter, unless you press me in question time. But what we're having now is the bare bones. General groups survive. Individuals are not guaranteed, even if they are very smart and very clever and they hone their survival
I'm
skills.
very good.
Debbie says very good. Aval shar hatunuot.
I'm very good.
You have to be very good as well to get any divine providence. But that means that you have to devote your life to becoming smart and not enjoying yourself. Aval shar hatunuot hachalot b'chol pirtei amin chalot b'mikre. ואינן לדעת אריסטו, but הגעתו של מנהיג ולא בסדרו של מסדר. God doesn't actually intervene when it comes to the individuals. למשל, now he explains what will happen to a very talented individual, a very good individual, when natural disaster strikes. Ruach soeret or lo soeret, a hurricane or a storm that's not quite a hurricane. ובלי ספק תפיל כמה עלים מעץ אחד,
Rabbi Sinclair share on if you want to hear it. I don't know if you want to. Rabbi Sinclair.
Evan, Mickey, can we? Okay. Tapil Evan מאיזשהו גדר אבנים, תעלה עפר על יסף כלשהו. Okay. Anything that happens, okay, is not governed by God. Okay, He is not concerned, and even if you have pious people on a ship and they're all davening, okay, or they're in a building and it collapses, they're in shul and the building collapses and they all die, en hevdel ledarto. According to Aristotle, there's no difference ben chatul shenikal ba'achbar v'tarafoto, between a cat which catches a mouse and consumes it as prey, or achabish shetaraf zavuv, or a spider that devours a fly, leven aryeh ra'ev, a hungry lion, shepagash navi, that met a prophet, v'tarafoto, and mauls the prophet to death. This is a reference to, of course, Kings 1, chapter 13, verse 24. There was a lion who killed a prophet. Hamaminim b'deya zot af miben hamordim b'toratenu hem omrim azav Hashem et haaretz. Maimonides doesn't like Aristotle either on this point. He generally loves, admires, and respects Aristotle, but he always will disagree when he needs to. So he doesn't like Aristotle, who makes this basic connection, okay, a distinction between the group and the individual. So, as far as he's concerned, God has left the earth. Not that God is dead, like Epicurus. God has left the earth like the deists. If you want to speak Jean, just unmute anytime you want. But you have to unmute. Unmute. You're not unmuted. We can't hear you. Unmute. Your three dots. Unmute.
Or press the
D'accord.
Ah, d'accord, formidable.
According to this second theory or hypothesis, is there a difference between sublunar and
Of course, the higher you go up into the spheres, the more hashgacha there is. Okay? As I say.
when I think that Ralbach, Levi Ben Gershon, had the very similar theory to that.
In many ways, Ralbag copies Rambam, and in some, he goes even further. But that's true. That's what it's given as the sublunar world. Okay. The third opinion. Line 31. נוגדת את הדעה השנייה הזאת, היא דעתם של הסוברים שאין בכל המציאות דבר מקרי כלל, לא פרטי ולא כללי, אלא הכל ברצון. Now, the other view, third view, is that everything is God's will. Kavana v'hanhaga. Nothing happens in this world without God planning and making it happen. Zot hi da'ata shel kat ha'ashariya. The Ashariya, okay, Hassan al-Ashri, the Mujadid, religious reformer of the 10th century, okay, who says everything in the world happens, it's God's will and God's will alone. Mikera Muslimin. Min ha'de'a zot hitchayvu gnuyot chamurot. Rambam says, this view leads us to many ridiculous and despicable opinions. But the Asherites had no problem in accepting them. Wind did not cause the leaf to fall. God decreed that every single leaf that falls, that it should fall. And they should fall here in this particular place in front of your garage. And they should fall, this leaf shall fall in front of your garage at 8:30 in the morning. And only here. All of this is God's plan. That means that everything we do has been predetermined. You've got no free will. Absolutely. From God's perspective, no free will. אין שום יכולת לעשות או לא לעשות דבר, כמו כן מתחייב מדעה זאת שטבע אפשרי יהיה בטל לגבי דברים אלה. There's no such thing as a possible result. Everything is predetermined. שדברים אלה היו כולם מחויבים או נמנעים. It was either going to happen or not. הם קיבלו זאת עליהם, the Asherites received this view, אמרו שהדברים שאנו קוראים להם אפשריים, שראובן יקום ושמעון יבוא, הם אפשריים מבחינתנו. Possibility is only from a human perspective, אבל מבחינתו יתעלה, אין דבר מהם אפשרי כלל, אלא הם מחויבים או נמנעים. But from God's perspective, it's all predetermined, we have absolutely no free choice. מדעה זו התחייב גם שעניין המצוות לא מועיל דבר. Rambam doesn't like this at all. Then what's the point of having commandments? What's the point of telling people to do or not to do? כי האדם אשר בא אליו כל המצווה אינו יכול לעשות דבר, לא לקיים מה שנצטווה, ולא להימנע ממה שנאסר עליו. There's no freedom of choice or of action. הכת הזאת אמרה שהוא יתעלה חפץ בכך. Everything is God's will. Allah wished it. I'm not responsible. Everything is set. Arab fatalism. לשלוח נביאים לצוות ולאסור לעיין, לעורר תקווה, להפחיד, אף על פי שאין בנו יכולת, אפשר שיטיל עלינו דברים נמנעים. Prophets come, prophets go, they can tell us things, doesn't matter. They can tell us to jump in a lake, doesn't matter. God's will is set, and only God's will happen. אפשר שנציית לצו ונענש. You might listen to a prophet or a wise man or a moral person, and you'll be punished. Namre oto, you might be immoral, ולקבל שכר, and you'll get a reward. It's all in the hands of Allah. מן הדעה הזאת גם מתחייב שלמעשיו יתעלה אין תכלית. That God has no goal in mind, just changes his mind. הם קיבלו עליהם את המעמסה כבדה של אבסורדים אלה, כולם, enjoy the modern Hebrew whilst it lasts, okay? They accepted upon themselves these absurd ideas, לשם שמירה על שלמות דעה זאת, עד כדי כך שכאשר אנו רואים אדם שנולד עיוור או מצורע. Say somebody's born blind or with a terrible disease. אשר אין לנו יכולים לומר שהוא חטא, חטא. There's no way we can say that an innocent baby deserved to be punished by suffering a physical defect. אנו אומרים, כך חפץ האל. This is the will of Allah. וכאשר אנו רואים אדם מעולה, ירא שמיים שנהרג בייסורים, we see virtuous people horribly tortured and killed, אנו אומרים, כך חפץ האל. That's what God wished. אין בזאת עוול. No iniquity or evil here. כי אפשר לדעתם שהאל יאסר את מי שלא חטא ויגמול טוב לחוטא. There's no divine justice. דבריהם על עניינים אלה מפורסמים. So, does Rambam agree with the Asherites? Certainly not. How about the other group? Hadea Haravi'it. He, da'at mi shezoveh shel ha'adam yesh yacholet. Now, this is the Mut Azalite view, okay? I'll kind of précis this for you, I think. The Mut Azalites, Mut Azila, by the way, means withdrawal. Refers to Wasil ibn Atta, who withdrew from a certain study circle of Hassan al-Basri. This goes back again to the 8th century, very early in Persia. And he tried to find a middle way here. So he says, well, God has providence. He looks after everything in the world, including animals too. So Peter Singer would be very happy with this school of thought. Animals too are looked after, but the justice of God's providence is not sensed in this world. You have to wait till the next world. Sometimes terrible things will happen to you. You don't deserve it. But in the next world, everything will be made right. And that's the essence of this view. And we find, for example, Mutazalites, the Asherites broke away from them, saying that in the world to come, you'll be amazed at how many animals you'll find, because they were all treated badly by humans, and God rewards them in the world to come. They get a pitsui. So look here, line 20. An innocent mouse, and I don't mean the thing you press next to your computer. A cat or a swooping bird of prey ate it. God was okay with this happening in this world. The mouse will get a fine meal and will be able to live well and without fear of any cats in the next world. So this is the Mutazila. This is our view, says the Rambam. By the way, he doesn't say it's his view. And you have to know, when the Rambam says Dat Toratenu, he doesn't mean his view. He means the view of the Torah. If you were to ask for Das Torah, okay, that's what you'll get. This is the main line, Yeshiva, okay, Glen Ira Road, Flatbush, or Enga approach, okay? Ani odiacha mimena ma shene'emar b'mfurash b'sifrei nevi'enu v'hu ma shema'aminim bo hamon chachamenu. Ken emsor lecha ma she'eminu kama min hamucharim. Okay, all of this, and I will say, Yesod, line 24. Yesod Torat Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom v'chol ha'olchim b'kvotea hu she'adam, line 25, the beginning. Ba'al yecholet muchletet. Rambam says we all have absolute free will. This is for Rambam a sine qua non, no departure. We all have real free will. Lomar shehu b'tivo b'bechirato v'rtzono oseh kol ma shenitan la'adam la'asoto mibli she'yibareh lo davar chadash klal. V'chol minei ba'alei hachayim na'im b'rtzonam. Animals, every living creature moves. Remember, movement to the Greeks is very important, according to its will. Kach chafetz, and this is what God wants. Klomar, chefzo hakadum me'olam shekol barei hachayim yanu b'rtzonam v'she'adam yeh ba'al yicholet l'chol ma shehu rotzeh o bocher mima shebegeder yicholto. Whatever you can do, you're free to choose to do or not to do. Zeu sod yisod sheme'olam lo nishma shoneh mimenu be'emunato. What's the next phrase? The next two words?
Thank God.
Thank God. Todah la'el. You can hear the Rambam here getting quite emotional. Thank God that none of us Jews, rabbinic Jews, deny at least the principle of free will, because he absolutely rejects the idea of the Ashariya that everything is predetermined and the will of Allah. V'chen miklal yisodot Torat Moshe Rabbeinu shlo yitkaven. There's no injustice here. Everything good that happens to people is because they deserve it. Everything bad is because they deserve it. You make a wrong choice, you're punished. You make a right choice, you're rewarded. Even if a thorn goes into the skin of your hand, and you immediately take the thorn out, this is a punishment. And even if you have a little bit of enjoyment, for example, okay, what does he say? Anything. Gentle breeze brushed your cheek when the temperature was 50 degrees. This is a reward. Okay? And it fits the pasuk ki chol drakav mishpat elemuna ve'en avel, beginning of line 33, sadik v'yasharhu. That's what we read in the Torah. God is absolutely just. אבל אין אנו יודעים מאיזו בחינה הם ראויים. Now he says, of course, the $64,000 issue. We do not know when we merit the status of good and when we deserve the status of bad. הוא איננו מעניש אלא את מי שמבינינו שראוי לעונש. זה מה שתורת משה רבינו אומרת במפורש, שהכל בהתאם למה שכל אדם ואדם ראוי לו. על פי דעה זו התנהלו דברי המון חכמינו, שמוצא אותה אומרים בברורות. Now he cites strings of lines from the Talmud. Line 36, אין מיתה בלא חטא, there's no death without sin, ולא ייסורין בלא עוון, and there is no suffering without sin. They said, במידה שאדם מודד בו מודדין לו, you get what you deserve. And this is the Mishnah in Sotah. והם אמרו מפורשות בכל מקום שהצדק מחויב והכרחי, everything is worked out exactly as it ought to be. Now, good, by the way, says the Rambam, isn't only doing what God said, it is responding to your inner sense of good, your teva. We all ought to know what to do. Now, here I want to read this carefully. It's the fourth word on line 40. Kavanati. What I mean, li'sur ha'oshek v'ha'avel. Oppressing people, being terrible to people, is something that you will be responsible for and be punished for, even if it wasn't written in the Torah. והם אמרו, אין הקדוש ברוך הוא מפקח זכות כל בריאה. Everybody gets their just deserts. ואמרו, כל האומר קודשא בריחו ותרן הוא יתוותרן מאוהי. Your stomach should be churned if you say God lets people off. אלא מעריך הפה וגבי דילי. Punishment will come in time. וכן אמרו, אינו דומה מסובב ועושה למי שאינו מסובב. הם הבהירו שאף איש לא הוטל עליו עול מצוות, although you were not commanded to do or to desist, נותנים לו שכרו. If you're a good person of your own nature, or you desist from evil things because you know they are evil, you will be punished and rewarded respectively. לעיקרון זה מתאימים כל דבריהם. And then there's something else. Of line 1 on page 3. כן מופיע בדברי החכמים תוספת שאינה מופיע בגוף התורה. Now the rabbis added something because clearly this is a little sticky. Everything is just, every punishment, every terrible thing that happens in the world is a punishment. It's a bit rich, okay? Now he says something else. He says the rabbis added the idea of suffering which purges, okay? These are called suffering of love, brachot, famous ייסורים של אהבה. כי לפי דעה הזאת יש שפוגעים באדם פגעים לא בגלל חטא שקדם. Sometimes you get to suffer not because of your sin, אלא כדי שירבה שכרו, to increase your reward. If you survive the suffering and do not deny God, which is what Eov was tested in relation to, you will have so much reward. You will be so much in the black when it comes to the books of divine providence. That's also, by the way, an idea Rambam says we find in the Mutazila. Ach en katuv b'Torah lidan ze. Toratenu mitacheset ach rak lamatzavim shel pratim mibnei adam. Unlike Aristotle, Torah deals with every single individual. אבל הסיפור הזה על הפיצוי לבעלי חיים לא נשמע כלל לפנים באומנתנו. But he rejects Peter Singer entirely. Animals do not get a reward at all. איש מן החכמים לא הזכירו כלל. אולם, כאשר שמע אותו אחד המאוחרים מבין הגאונים ז"ל מפי המותזילה, but when one of the גאונים, and who's he talking about? Rav Sag, of course, Rav Sadia Gaon, heard this about animals, he said, you know what, it's probably true. So he would go for the mouse having a share in the world to come, but Rambam will not have a bar of that. Now we'll get to Maimonides himself.
Oh.
Now notice he gave us the Das Torah, okay? Torah view. Now we are learning. Sorry, Jean, what did you want to say?
I have the impression that last time when we spoke about providence, he said that it reacts only on people who have high intellect and who
And what do you think we're going to read now?
maybe
Exactly.
ah,
So let's read, okay? אילו מה שאני מאמין באשר יסוד זה, כלומר, השגחה האלוהית, הוא מה שאתה אליך. Now I'm going to tell you what I know, what I believe. באמונתי זאת שאתה אל. Now, he's always cagey because he knows you're going to jump down his throat. Okay? The rabbis around. אינני נשען על משהו מופתית הביאתני אליו, אלא נשען אני על מה שהתברר לי שהוא כוונת ספרו של האל וספרי נביאנו. This is very important, okay? Rambam is always trying to convince us that what he will accept mufti, the philosophy, the intellectual, to the extent that it fits in with the book, the good book, the Torah. That's Rambam's interpretation of the Torah. Since this view that he's going to present us is not the accepted view, he has to protect himself and say, this is the correct interpretation of scripture, of the Torah, of the books of the prophets, and I'm only telling you what's there. I'm not inventing this. This is not Aristotle. I'm not going all philosophical on you. No, I'm still the devout Jew, but I'm reading the Tanakh, if you like, sensibly. I'll put that in quotation marks. Pachot mugune, but he goes on the apologetics. My view is much less odious, min hadayot ha-kodmot, than the earlier views. Ukrova yoter al hakesh hasichli. Now, of course, by the back door, he slips in the intellect. And my view fits in best with the intellectual approach to how God should engage with the world. Okay? כי אני מאמין שהשגחה אלוהית בעולם השפל הזה, the sublunar world, Jean, okay? כלומר, מתחת לגלגל הירח, underneath the lunar sphere, היא בפרטי מין האדם בלבד. In general, only affects groups, large groups within the human race. רק מן זה, כל מצבי פרטיו וכל הטוב והרע הפוקדים אותם, מתאימים למה שהם ראויים לו. כמו שאמר, כי כל דרכיו משפט. And there is an element of justice there, okay? But we're already reading that Aristotle's idea of the general group rather than the individuals is in Maimonides' own theory. And there's also a concept of justice, okay? That combination is unique to Maimonides. Avad, 12. End of line 12. Other creatures, animals, and definitely plants, dati aleim kedat Aristo. Like Aristotle, God is interested in preserving as many species as he can, okay? But he doesn't care a whit about the individuals. I do not believe in any way that a leaf that falls is a result of God's will. Or kem. And no divine decree made a fly get eaten by a spider. And the fact that this is a good strategy. If you see a mosquito, spit at it. Apparently, the spit will kill the mosquito immediately. So this is what he says. If Reuven spat and the mosquito died, it's not God. Those wonderful films where you see those kingfishers and other birds just swoop up, down and pick up a fish. It's not Allah's will. Absolute serendipity, chance. כמו שסובר אריסטו, לדעתי לפי מה שאני סובר, השגחה האלוהית הולכת בעקבות השפע האלוהי ובעקבות המין שבו מדבק אותו שפע שכלי. So here, Jean, is what we are getting to the point. God's providence accompanies those individuals within a group that is gifted with intellectual ability. Ad shehu nasa bal sechel, until you become a Maimonidean intellectual, ומתגלה לו כל מה שגלוי לבעל שכל, הוא זה השם מתלווה אליו השגחה אלוהית. When you become a Maimonidean intellectual, God looks after you. Okay? Or maricha et kol maasav. Everything you do is going to be absolutely spot on. B'derech haschar va'onesh. So justice says, you, Maimonidean intellectual, should receive a much larger degree of divine providence than anyone else who is not in your class. מה שעורר אותי לדעה זאת, הוא שלא מצאתי מעולם כתוב בספרו של נביא, שהיה משגיח על פרט מפרטי בעלי החיים, זולת פרט האדם לבדו. Clearly in the Torah and in the Nevi'im, God only takes care of humans. הנביאים גם התפעלו שיש השגחה על פרטי האדם, שהרי הוא קל ערך מכדי שיושגח. He does a sort of a, if you like, a crafty move. He says also, why should God be interested in most human beings? After all, doesn't the psalmist say, and didn't we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Yamav ketsel over, that's by the way a bit from the Psalms, we are like a passing shadow. Ma adam batei daehu, beginning of line 22, who is man that you should take reckoning of him? Ben enosh v'takshavehu, pay attention to human beings. Adam la hevel dama, man is compared to vanity. Havel havalim, yamav ketzel over, ma enosh v'tizkerenu. Who is a person that you should even deign to reflect upon him? מופיעים כתובים גלויים שהשגחה היא בכל פרטי אדם, בכל מעשיהם נפקדים, היוצא יחד ליבם, המבין על כל מעשיהם ונאמר, etc. התורה כותבת במפורש על השגחה על פרטי האדם ופקידת מעשיהם, נאמר לו ביום פוקדי. All these psukim, okay, all the psukim concern people who deserve God's providence. They are already at the level of Maimonidean perfection. They're the ones about whom the Torah says God does take an interest. But everybody else goes under the rubric of chance and serendipity. En safek. Shematzavim shel shar pitei balei hachayim ukefi shesover Aristotle is right. God told Noah, for example, I'm not going to wipe out the entire human race as I did. But it says nothing about bits of the human race and even big bits of the human race. Therefore, we can also, by the way, use animals. But you've got psukim about God being nice to animals. Okay, Barchi Nafshi, he makes sure that they have food, and the young lions cry out for prey, and they get it if they're lucky. And he feeds all from the horned antelopes to the eggs of the lice. Nothing contradicts me. It's all for the species and not for the individuals. Generally, general groups and species can survive. I guess Maimonides remembers in the 13th century. Alexander, and he calls on Aristotle and Alexander of Aphrodisias in Aristotle's name. So everything has, if you look at the circle of life, go out on the savannah, the lions have what to eat, the antelopes have what to eat, there's a food chain, and as long as nothing drastic happens, it'll be all right. In the mega, okay? Okay. Now, how about Sar Balei Chayim Doraita, end of line 38? Don't we say that cruelty to animals is biblically mandated, and whoever is who is cruel to animals is subject to a penalty? Rambam says, we know this. How do we know this? How do the rabbis of Talmud know, by the way, that you have to be kind to animals? Because when we read about the account of Bilam and his donkey, What did the angels say to Bilam? Al me hikita et atoncha. According to Rambam, that was the sin that Bilam committed, beating his donkey. This makes us Maimonidean perfect people, as Debbie said, because we need to be good. In addition to be intellectually and theologically perfect, we are also virtuous people who don't spend our lives in vanity and carnal pleasures. So that we do not develop cruelty and we do not cause gratuitous pain. We are kind to animals because we need to become people who are infused with kindness, mercy, and pity for all life, because we are merciful and pitiful and people who have pity. Even on an animal. But of course, you can use animals, as it says, if you want to eat them for meat. Rambam would have been against bullfights, I think, okay? Or to treat animals cruelly. But it's there to make us into perfect people. Page 4. Now he says, I want you to understand me deeply. God knows everything, and he is all-powerful. Okay, this is the philosophical bind. He is all-powerful, okay, and he knows everything. But I believe, John, that hashgacha, God's caring about people, is dependent upon their intellectual perfection in Maimonidean terms, utsmuda elav. And that intellectual perfection is bent to understanding God to the fullest extent. The ultimate perfection. And he calls this ultimate perfection, which is knowledge of God, shefa, an overflowing of God's spirit into a human being. And that is how much hashgacha you get. This is my opinion, and this appears to me to be the best view, okay? La muskal v'lilshonot haTorah, both intellectually and as far as the Torah is concerned. So this is your Maimonidean hashgacha. John.
I have the impression that the four last lines is represent indeed what he thinks, but it's not evident for any people to understand it. Secondly, I don't see where he see in the prophets that the hashgacha is different for a big scientist or for a poor man, and he doesn't explain here why the prayer of a big intellectual is answered and the prayer of a poor stupid man doesn't.
Okay, Jean, I think that you have a simplistic idea of what a Maimonidean intellectual is. Too simplistic. Pashtanimida. Rambam, when he talks about an intellectual, doesn't mean a gifted scientist or a wonderful philosopher. He means somebody who is a gifted scientist, a wonderful philosopher, a great theologian who knows God better than any other theologian ever, and an entirely virtuous, ethical person who spends his whole life thinking holy thoughts about God. And he will say that the psukim in the Torah that talk about people who God looks after, who will look after like the apple of his eye, it's like Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Moshe. It's those type of people. Now, he has no absolute proof. I agree with you on that. But because he says that my view makes sense, both in terms of the Torah and the Nach, and in terms of the best philosophy of my time, I think that this is the truth. I am going to complete the picture I'm going to give you some interesting takes on this, and then we'll have some time for questions, okay? Chapter 18 really is a rounding up of chapter 17, okay? And what chapter 18 says is that, well, it actually pushes the point even more dramatically. It says that individuals will only get an overflow of divinity, that is, they'll be at the level where they get hashgacha, okay, if they will be both extremely intellectual and almost at the level of prophecy. And we know what it takes to become a prophet, okay? It takes intellect, theology, and ethics. The Ilu Haburim, I'm on line 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Maimonidean. The Burim, the ones who are ignorant, who have no desire to cultivate anything higher, Hem mishtalvim b'marach shar barei chaim. They are like the animals. In other words, the general human species will survive, but God does not pay attention to the individuals. Nimshal kabehemot nidmu. And Jean, you know this pasuk, says in Tehillim, Adam, certain type of Adam, is like a behemah. That's what it says. And Rambam says, it's not only that some people are like animals, means that there are people who are treated from the point of view of divine providence as if they were animals, that is, they are subject to chance and serendipity. Okay? V'inyan zeu yisod misodot haTorah v'alav hi benuya, klomar, hashgacha hi al kol prat o prat b'mei adam behetem lama shehu. We get the providence we deserve because of the work we've done to make ourselves into almost prophets. Hitbonen ketzad katuv b'mforash hashgacha al pirtei matzavei ha'avot. Look at the avot, Jean. Look at the avot. Piloteihem v'kinyanam ketzad huftach lahem. Each of the avot was given promises. You'll be all right, Abe, Itz, and Jack. Okay? Avraham ne'emar, to Abraham it was said, Anochi magen lecha, I will be your shield. Yitzchak ne'emar, ve'yeh imcha v'avarecheka, I'll be with you, I'll bless you. Yaakov amar v'nei anochi imach, u'shmarticha b'chol asher telech. Wherever you go, I will look after you. La'adon hanavim ne'emar, who is the Adon hanavim? Moshe Rabbeinu, ki yeyeh imach. I will be with you. But not with anybody else. According to their perfection. This is Maimonidean. It sounds better in Arabic, but never mind. The Hashgacha is on the excellent ones, and the Burim, the ones who are not anywhere near excellent, they are simply ignored. Raglei chasidav, chasido yishmor. God will look after. He will prevent the legs of his chasid from stumbling. Urshaim b'choshech hidamu. But the evil, they will wander around in darkness. Ki lo b'choach yigbar ish. הוא אומר שמה שחלק מבני האדם שמורים מפני הפגעים בעוד שבחלקם פגעים פוגעים, אין זה בהתאם לכוחותיהם הגופניים. That bit about לא בכוח יגבר איש means that physical power or strength alone will not save you. Okay? כפי שנאמר, כי לא בכוח יגבר איש. אלא זאת בהתאם לשלמות ולחיסרון, כלומר, קרבתם אל האל או רחוקם ממנו. לכן הקרובים אליו מוגנים ביותר. Those who are close to God will receive most hashgacha. Raglei chasido yishmo. הרחוקים ממנו חשופים למה שפוגע בהם במקרה. ואין מי שיגן עליהם מפני מה שאירע לפתע, כמו שהולך בחושך. The others are like wandering around in darkness, and they will probably, because they wander around in darkness, they will fall over something and be injured. עוד נאמר באשר השגחה למולים, שומר כל עצמותיו, אחת מהן לא נשברה. Not one single bone will be broken of an excellent one. עיני השם אל צדיקים ואוזניו אל שבתם. ז'ון, עיני השם אל מי? צדיקים. ואוזניו אל שבתם. יקראי בעיניהו. עמו אנוכי וצרה, אכלסהו ואכבדהו, אורכם והרי בשועתי, הכתובים המביעים עניין זה. That's the same chapter in Tehillim as the previous pasuk about the tzaddikim, okay, and the Shabbatam. הכתובים המביעים עניין זה, כלומר השגחה על אנשים כפרטים, לפי מידת שלמותם ומעלתם מרובים מספור. There are countless psukim about individual hashgacha. So Aristotle is wrong, individual human beings, but only a rare number of human beings get that hashgacha. Okay? Good. Gama philosophem sinu inyan zeh. This also appears amongst the philosophers. Abu Nasr al-Farabi, a famous Platonist, okay? Al-Farabi, he lived in the 10th century, merged Plato and Aristotle. This is, of course, before Al-Razali came along and put Muslim philosophy and theology back into the benighted arena where everything is simply the will of God, fatalism, okay? Now, Al-Farabi was very sophisticated, says, B'ptichat BRB urole etika ha.
Nikomachit.
Okay, Nicomachean Ethics. By the way, Jean, do you know this is Aristotle's famous book on ethics? Why is it called the Nicomachean Ethics? Do you know?
No.
Nicomacheus was his father. And in ancient Greek, Nicomacheus stands for a very brave warrior. His father was a very famous soldier, and he named this book after his father. That is Nicomachean Ethics. של אריסטו לאמור, אלה שיש להם יכולת להעביר את עצמם ממידה למידה, הם אלה אשר עליהם אמר אפלטון שהשגחת האל מרובה בהם יותר. Now, in Greek, this is very interesting, because what it means, actually translated into modern terms, is that the person who can adapt best to a situation is somebody who gets divine providence. In other words, up until now, we've probably been thinking, yes, Rambam believes that God is going to intervene to save the righteous person who is like Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. If we look at the stories in the Tanakh, Avraham does well most of the time. Yitzchak has a couple of ups and downs, but basically, I guess he's all right. Yaakov has many ups and downs, but he's okay in the end, okay? This is what we have been thinking. But Aristotle introduces something a little different as understood by Al-Farabi. What he's saying is that you, as a very intelligent, very talented individual, know that you have to change your expectations and your hopes in accordance with the situation in which you find yourself. As I said, it comes out much better in the Greek, but the Hebrew is not bad, because he says, lahavir et atzmam, to move themselves mimidah limidah, from one habitus to another habitus, one way of thinking to another way of thinking. So the talented individual, the philosopher king, finds himself in a jungle surrounded by hungry lions. He will do better than somebody who comes in without training and just flies into a panic and falls to bits. The trained philosopher says, how do I convince the lions not to eat me? So he might decide to take a thorn out of a lion's paw. And of whom do I speak? Androcles. Okay, never mind. He took the thorn out of do a good deed for the lion. And by the way, there's an amazing story. It occurred in 1938 in Africa. There was a lion went to the porch of a employee of a shell company in Tanganyika, and he takes the chef's wife. So the cry goes up. The cry goes up. How do you say lion in Swahili? Simba, Simba, Simba. Simba is eating the cook's wife. And of course, the Paka Englishman takes his rifle and he starts to run after the cook who's running after the lion with his wife held. You can see her in the jaws of the lion. And the Englishman says, "Cook, get out of the way. I want to shoot the lion. And the cook says, no, 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 I will catch the lion. I will rescue my wife. And you can imagine the scene. They are running. When the lion hears the people running after him, he drops the cook's wife and he gallops off at a tremendous speed. And this is reported, as I said, in the Dar es Salaam Daily News. All the cook's wife sustained was lion's saliva on her dress. Their mouth was entirely soft, not a single sharp tooth. Nobody understood what the lion wanted with the cook's wife. I leave that to your wildest feral imaginations. But he was taking off, and this went the rounds. Clearly something we can have the ability, I'm just sort of to lighten up the evening, okay? We have the ability perhaps to deal with the situation if we have the cool and the intelligence and the knowledge. And this is really what Al-Farabi says when he's interpreting Aristotle. And this is what Rambam may, in fact, and here I'm going to let you into a couple of secrets, okay, shortly. But let's finish this bit from Al-Farabi, line 30. Hitbonen efo. Now he says, consider carefully. Ketzad hevianu ofen ze shel hitbonenut ledat et amituto shel ma shemasu haneviim kulam. But the Rambam says, of course, this is in the prophets. Aleim shalom. בדבר השגחה הפרטית המיוחדת לכל איש ואיש לפי מידת שלמותו. As you are perfect, so you get more השגחה. וכיצד זה מתחייב מצד העיון? כאשר ההשגחה הולכת בעקבות השכל, כפי שציינו, ולא יהיה נכון לומר שההשגחה היא במינים ולא בפרטים, כפי שנפוץ בשם כמה משיטות לפילוסופים, אין נמצא מחוץ לדעת זולת הפרטים. Rambam always focuses on the individual. Those individuals who are closely bound up with the divine intellect, he keeps on saying, think carefully, deeply. What does that mean? That means that he wants you to go beyond. Now he says that if you follow my view, yitbatlu absurdim, you won't be believing ridiculous things, you'll be redeemed from benighted ignorance. But Shmuel ibn Tibon, who read this carefully before he translated it, said, what does this mean? Okay, does it really mean that what Rambam is saying is that God intervenes to a very limited? Remember all the things we've learned. We've talked about creation. Remember, creation is very much like Aristotle, except for the fact that we do believe in creatio ex nihilo, bria yesh me'ayin. God did create out of nothing, but the rest follows fairly much Aristotle. We talked about prophecy. What did we say in prophecy? It follows the philosophers, except for the fact that God has to give you the gift at the end of the race. And the philosophers would say, no, you have it naturally. Here too you'd say, God intervenes only for the most gifted, intellectually, ethically, and spiritually perfect Maimonidean heroes, such as Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Moshe, David, etc., which is again a little give to the philosophical, the natural. Will comes in, but only minor. Rasag would say will is major. Yehuda Levi says God's will is the major thing. Hasidic teachers have said that not a single leaf, right, falls off a tree without God being involved. Rambam is a long way away from all of this. But the question is that really what he means? And our Ibn Tibon, Shmuel Ibn Tibon, wrote a letter to Rambam and asked him this question. He said, at the end of your chapter 18, okay, there is an implication. Again, this is the way the Rambam works. You have to spell it out. He won't do it for you. There is an implication when you read Aristotle and you read Al-Farabi in the originals, you feel that what is going on here is not that God actively intervenes, but that somebody who is a Maimonidean hero has the capacity to survive bad things better than most people, and to find joy and satisfaction in things better than most people. So it really is an internal, natural, psychological defense. So what we could say, and by the way, his son Moshe ibn Tibbon took this even further. Shmuel ibn Tibbon says that the Maimonidean hero does not regard a misfortune. Remember, Rambam himself didn't have an easy life. 13 years old, family is harried, persecuted. Wander around the Iberian Peninsula, we don't know what they would do. They arrive in Fez, they have a little interlude, okay? And then nearly drowned on the way to Eretz Israel. Get to Egypt, a little bit of peace and quiet, and then David, Rambam's brother, is drowned in the Indian Ocean. And Rambam has to lead a frenetic lifestyle to keep himself and the whole community head above water until his fairly early death. By those standards, no, but at 70, he was dead. And he is saying to us, if you are a Maimonidean perfect person, will be able to manage the vicissitudes of life, the slings and what of fortune?
Arrows.
Slings and arrows. You'll be able to manage that because you have all these Maimonidean qualities. Therefore, adversity will not undermine you, and therefore you'll find joy even in the midst of things which might not give joy to other people. So the advantage of the perfected is at the level of consciousness. Is this correct, says Shmuel ibn Tibbon to Rambam? Does he get a reply? We have no record of any reply. So Ibn Tibbon translates, we're using Schwartz, but Ibn Tibbon gives you a couple of nuances, but as I told Yael from the very beginning, you have to join the dots. Now, Moshe ibn Tibbon actually comes out with this black and white. He writes a famous letter and he says, you know what? The Rambam meant that the perfect people are just more capable of ensuring their survival than the imperfect people. They're not sidetracked by basic desires, by silly things. They don't fritter away their lives in things that distract them from what's important. And they understand science, they understand how things work, and they, therefore, have most hashgacha, they survive best. So the natural and the psychological comes back here. Which of these two views is, if you like, the best Jewish view? The view that there is some divine hashgacha, God saves certain people because they are the most perfect, or God has given us the ability to make ourselves perfect, and that state of perfection allows us to deal with life in all its vicissitudes and its high points, and always retain a very, very superior view that helps us survive in the best possible way, morally, intellectually, spiritually, and ethically. So I leave you to ponder, but I will stop the screen share. If anybody wants to ask a question, make a point, this is the time, because next week perhaps we'll have a lighter evening. We'll talk about Rambam and a couple of things to do with, I shan't steal my own thunder. And then we'll move on to the question of evil, where again Rambam has a very unique and original approach to evil in the world and how we can combine that with God being all-knowing and all-powerful. Okay, anybody like to make a comment?
Well,
Melanie, you're on.
I was just going to say it's a very attractive formula because it's entirely realistic. We can all sort of appreciate that we can all get there, but it doesn't seem very elevated for this sort of the question of divine perfection in man. Is that all that it amounts to? That we can actually survive life? I mean, that's not a small thing, but given the sort of framework in which this is presented, it seems very modest.
You could say it's a little overreaching. Maimonides' perfection, as I said, embraces intellect, it embraces metaphysics and theology, it embraces ethics and morality. So to get into this club of those who have divine providence, you have to be a very special person indeed. But that's very Greek. Remember, we talked about the fact that when Greeks say an athlete can, they don't mean take a statistical survey of all athletes. They mean the person who won the last marathon 4 years ago. That is our model, and you all need to aspire. Okay. Now, if you accept that as the intellectual fashion of your time, okay, this is what the best people believe. All right. Rambam succeeds in melding that into Tanakh, Talmud, rabbinic learning. So it wouldn't have sounded odd to people in his time. Remember, Greek society was hierarchical. Okay, nobody thought much about slaves. And women didn't figure that highly either. So you're talking about a very elitist approach, which Rambam offers as a challenge. Okay, he himself, I don't think makes any bones in any of his writings about the fact that we have talented individuals, and then what we do eventually is we have to produce something for the hoi polloi. So you have principles of faith, you have the sections in the Mishneh Torah that we talked about, Hilchot Shuvah, Hilchot Yisodei HaTorah. We can all, if you like, dip in to a little bit, but this major theory of Hashgacha, Rambam doesn't present anywhere except in the Moreh Nevukhim, and he does so because he thinks it makes absolute sense to him, both in terms of philosophy and in terms of Jewish theology. God is challenging us. God is challenging us. Now, it happens to be that you can see there are always two views of Rambam's texts, and I said this before, and I'm trying to spell this out now. There's what you might call the Orthodox view, that still says God is there, he intervenes, miracles are real, okay? And you'll find that somebody, why were certain rabbis say, I shouldn't be saying this, but I'll sort of fly this. Some rabbis would say, a lot of rabbis, by the way, outstanding rabbis were saved in the Holocaust, okay? Whereas many, many, many ordinary Jews were not. Rambam might have a way of dealing with that. And I said there are particular rabbis who God thought was so important for the future of Jewish law, Jewish life, that they needed to be on, can I dare say this, Kastner's train, okay? Or they needed to be spirited away to Switzerland, Mickey, okay? Yes, I said certain rabbis needed to get to Switzerland. Certain rabbis needed to escape to England or to the States. Others didn't. Can I say that? Not really. I have to say lule de mistafina. But Rambam would be able somehow to account for that. And most of us say, there's no way. We can't. We don't know. And silence is what we need when it comes to thinking about, is there a reason for this, okay? People who suffer terrible fates, we're not going to start saying now, there was a reason, okay? But if you want to think about it theologically, Maimonides is offering you a model, okay? Most people who read this or hear this are like shocked and don't really like the fact that this is such an elitist view, okay? But again, as I said, if you think about it, if you put it extremely well, realistically speaking, much of what we've just said now makes sense. People did escape from the Shoah, and some of them did it because of their strength, their brains, and their ability to think broadly, to plot a course that took them out, okay? And most did not. So here you have a challenge.
But then
Yes.
atheists would say that
Yeah.
we don't need God at all. We just use our brains and we came through. Who says it was Kochi ve'otzem yadi asa li tachayil hazeh? that I can think so cleverly and so wisely, I can come through all by myself. Who's to say God help me at all?
Okay, that's certainly something you could say in terms of, we'll get this straight change, in terms of Rambam's approach. The Rambam will say, unless you have God, you will probably not get there because you'll be sidetracked. You see, I don't know how to put this. God is the anchor for all the good. You are very likely to be sidetracked. If not on the intellectual, then the ethical. You'll do terrible things, Jeff, to assure your survival. You know, you're on a train and it comes to choosing, you'll sacrifice umpteen lives to save yours. The Maimonidean hero will not. He will say that certain sacrifices are not worthwhile making to save my life, so I will not. But he'll do that out of profound knowledge and understanding. God is the external factor that keeps us on a keel that doesn't give in entirely to our desires. And this is why God is so necessary. And this is a line from some Greek philosophers to the present day. God is so important. There's something outside of ourselves that we can measure the standards that we've erected, okay? We can measure them against what we believe and understand to be God's will, even the concept of a God. Those people who stood up during the Shoah and said, we will not give in, they had God on their side. They all had some concept of God. Many were priests. Many were very devout Catholics, precisely because of God. God gives us that extra thing that the enlightened atheists do not have. Okay?
Good advice. Okay.
All right. So are we ready for next week? Same time,